Hi, this is Steve Endo, and I'm a Microsoft Dynamics GP MVP. And today I'd like to discuss a technique to dramatically improve eConnect performance. It can significantly improve GP import speed, but there is a catch. Let's get started. So if you're familiar with eConnect, you should be aware of eConnect serialization and how eConnect converts your data objects to XML. And as part of that process, eConnect serialization supports transaction arrays. So in the code sample you see here, I have a GL transaction, and that GL type variable is an array. So I'm taking my single transaction and converting it to an array to be serialized. But serialization can handle single or multiple transactions and convert it to XML. So instead of just having one transaction, I could have 100 transactions in that GL transaction type array, and eConnect would dutifully convert it to XML. So I found this a long time ago when I first started using eConnect, and I thought, that's interesting. It supports a single transaction, but it also has arrays, so I can send multiple transactions. So I did a test and wanted to see what the difference would be and why I would do single versus multiple. And this was quite a while ago. I was using, I believe, GP 7.5 and Visual Basic 6 with the eConnect COM objects at the time. So my observations at that time were that multiple transactions offered no performance improvement. I'm pretty sure I didn't see any noticeable difference between single versus multiple transaction submissions because I am positive that I decided that there was no benefit to submitting multiple transactions. Additionally, I found that if you submit multiple transactions, a single error among any of those transactions will cause the entire batch to fail and roll back. So if you submit 100 transactions and you have one error, all 100 roll back, none are committed, and you get the error message back and have to start all over again. Additionally, if you submit 100 transactions and you have 3 errors, that 100 transaction batch will fail. You'll get 1 error message back. You won't know you have 3 errors until you resubmit it 2 more times, and you have to fix those errors or resolve those errors one at a time if you aren't able to find the issues via validating the data in advance. So, as a result, I've recommended against submitting multiple transactions to eConnect for over 10 years now. So this question came up again recently, and someone asked me, well, can you submit multiple transactions to eConnect? And I was going to respond, you can, but I don't recommend it. But I thought, well, it's been a really long time since I tested it. So let me just make sure that nothing has changed and see how eConnect behaves and just get some actual metrics as to the performance and just confirm that there is no significant benefit. So I performed some tests using Dynamics GP 2016, and of course I'm using the eConnect.net assemblies now, and I did some tests submitting single transactions and compared them to the submission of multiple transactions. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. So here I have my Dynamics GP batch load test tool that I developed that helps me load test eConnect and do performance testing in Dynamics GP. And in this test, I'm going to submit 100 journal entries individually. So it's going to generate a single journal entry, submit it to eConnect, get a response, then submit number 2, number 3, etc. So let's give that a try. So here you see it is dutifully importing those transactions, and we're 40 transactions. So it's moving along several transactions per second. It's not blazing fast, but it's not bad. And we're coming up on 100. So it imported 100 GL transactions in about 16 seconds. Okay, great. So now let's see what happens if I submit 100 GL transactions in a single XML document to eConnect. So I'll generate the 100 journal entries, hand the entire XML document over to eConnect and say, submit this, and it will do the work to import 100 journal entries. Significant difference. So using a single submission, we were able to generate 100 journal entries in Dynamics GP in 3 seconds versus 16 seconds when sending individually. That is a huge performance improvement. So let's see what happens if I go up to 500 transactions. It imported 500 transactions in 13 seconds. So in less than the time it took to import 100 GL transactions individually, it was able to import 500. So let's try to get close to 16 seconds. So let's try 750 transactions. Okay, so over 16 seconds, but somewhere between 500 and 750 journal entries can be imported when you submit them all at once. That is a massive, massive performance improvement, and that would help to explain why I've been frustrated in some cases where I needed very high volume imports but just couldn't get the performance. I was submitting them individually when I could have been sending them in as a batch. And as long as I have ways to deal with the errors and the document numbering and other concerns, I could get a huge performance improvement. So let's try AP invoices. So let's try a benchmark of 100 AP invoices using individual transaction submissions to eConnect. So you see the performance looks similar to GL transactions, several transactions per second, not blazing fast, but not bad. So 16 seconds for 100 transactions. Now let's try a single submission to eConnect. 2 seconds. Incredible. Huge, huge difference. Okay, so let's try 750 transactions here. So there we have it. 750 AP invoices imported in 17 seconds, whereas it took 16 seconds just to import 100 individually. So roughly 7-to-1 performance improvement when you submit multiple transactions at once. Huge, huge difference. I've only tested GL journal entries and AP invoices so far with this. I don't yet have these other transaction types wired up to submit multiple transactions at once, but given what I'm seeing with both of those transaction types, I'm assuming it is the case for most, if not all, eConnect transactions that submitting multiple transactions at once will improve performance. So, to summarize our new test results in 2018, we found that sending multiple transactions to eConnect has a huge, huge performance benefit. What changed? As far as I can tell, the real difference is with the eConnect.NET assemblies versus the old COM objects for eConnect. Because the assembly of the application data is client-side, and as you saw, that didn't take very long for it to assemble those hundreds of transactions, and it appears that the submission of each transaction to eConnect, the underlying SQL activity that requires, and then the response back, that process has overhead, and when you multiply that by hundreds of transactions, it's going to have a significant impact on your performance. Now, errors still pose an issue. So I did a test where I caused errors to occur within the submissions. And if I'm importing 100 transactions and there are 5 errors, it will cause the entire batch to roll back until I fix every one of those. And additionally, I only get one error message back. So if there are 5 errors in my batch, I get error number 1, I can fix that. I run into error number 2, and so forth. So it can be a hassle if you potentially have some errors in your batches that you can't fully anticipate or validate for. Your batch submission will fail, you're going to have to fix it, resubmit, and you'll need a process for that. And if you are numbering your transactions before you submit them to eConnect, say you're issuing journal entry numbers or AP vouchers or SOP numbers, if you are submitting 500 transactions and that rolls back, you may end up consuming those transaction numbers. If you're not storing them and retaining them with your data, perhaps in a staging table, you'll end up burning through 500 journal entries if that batch fails and you have to resubmit it. And the accounting folks and the auditors may not be thrilled that you're burning journal entry numbers and have these huge gaps of consecutive journal entry numbers in your GL. So that's a consideration as well. You can definitely work through it by storing that information in a staging table or in some other method, but something to consider if you are submitting multiple transactions. So my new recommendation, I would say in lower volume environments, this isn't relevant. It doesn't really matter. You can still send single transactions to eConnect. The performance is good enough, and it has the convenience of being able to handle individual transaction errors separately. So if you're importing 500 transactions, you can deal with the 5 errors you may encounter. The other 495 transactions will be imported successfully, and you can deal with the 5 that had errors whenever convenient, and it doesn't hold anything up. I still think it's easier, it's more convenient, it's simpler to deal with overall. But there are some high volume GP environments where they are operating literally 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, importing millions of transactions and then posting millions of transactions. And in those environments, this would definitely be a significant benefit to improve performance. If you're up against the wall, have very tight import windows, or you're processing 24/7 and you're trying to just get imports to run outside of your backup and maintenance windows, then definitely consider this approach. But you will need to have a solution for fully validating your data prior to submission in order to minimize errors that come back from eConnect. You're going to have a solution for dealing with transaction numbering so you don't burn through transactions. And then obviously, if you end up having errors in your batches that you submit, you're going to need to have a process such that if you have to keep resubmitting to get past your errors, you need a way to solve those errors and resubmit. So if you have the ability to deal with those caveats, then yes, definitely consider multiple transactions if you need the higher performance. So I hope you found that interesting. If you're interested in more of these topics, you can follow me on Twitter at Steve Endo, and you can also check out my blog at dynamicsgpland.blogspot.com.